What's going on, everybody? Today's video is going to be a CPU comparison between the Ryzen 5900X and 7800X 3D. I did compare these two CPUs a few weeks ago in a two-part video that focused on 4K. However, this video will focus on 1440p. I said I would take a look at this, and I also got some requests to look at it. I will list on the screen the two setups and what we're using for specs. And we're also going to look at some games with ray tracing on and ray tracing off, because that can also affect CPU performance. And then there's also a couple other things that I want to add on top as well. That's more like preferences of mine. But anyway, without wasting any more time, let's begin with Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. We're going to start with 1440p native, and we're going to be using the ultra graphical preset for this one. And then we're going to do the built-in benchmark run again with DLSS set to quality as well. So as you can see here, the differences are pretty much the same. The frame times look a little bit better on the 7800X 3D, and you'll see at the end results page the 7800X 3D score is a little bit higher, but I'd say it's within margin of error, right? We're GPU bound here with the ultra graphical preset, even with a 4090. And another thing worth mentioning is that I did get new NVMe SSDs, bigger ones, for my 7800X 3D PC. So that got a brand new Windows install yesterday. And then my 5900X PC, I did do the same thing on that a couple of months ago, so that got a brand new Windows install a couple of months ago as well. And the 7800X 3D PC definitely needed it, I feel, because I wasn't getting the smoothest of frame times previously. If you look at some of my previous videos, it wasn't, sometimes the 5900X looked better as far as frame times, which was kind of strange, but this definitely looks the way it's supposed to now. But yeah, as you can see here, it's kind of similar to the 4K video I made with these built-in benchmarks the other day. The results are more or less the same because we're GPU bound. So I guess we're going to have to see what DLSS quality looks like. We should technically be able to see a difference there, and these are the results here. You can pause it if you want to take a more thorough look at them. Now it's time to look at 1440p DLSS set to quality, and again we're using the ultra graphical preset, and we should see a little bit of a difference here, and we do see the 7800X 3D running a bit faster. It's nothing crazy, but the 1% lows are definitely better, so are the FPS averages. And I mean, you guys got to remember that this isn't like 100% representative of actually playing the game, because playing the game, it's a first-person view type of gameplay. But I do like this just because it cycles through different scenarios and, you know, puts a equal load across both systems in a side-by-side setting, which is ideal. It's kind of what you want to see. But again, I mean, this game is very GPU demanding, so it kind of goes to show that, you know, we're having to use essentially 1440p with DLSS set to quality to begin to see a somewhat noticeable difference. And you will see this even at the end of the results page with the score. You will see the 7800X 3D is quite a bit ahead on the actual total score, whereas previously at 1440p native, they were pretty close, I'd say, within margin of error. But here, especially in this last scene here, the 7800X 3D is almost like 20% faster on the 1% lows, which is a very important metric for smoothness. And then again, this is the results here. You guys can pause it if you want to look at them more thoroughly. In this next part, it's a little bonus I wanted to throw in for you guys. And what I've done is essentially capped the frame rate to 120 FPS on the right. And by capping the FPS, we can actually get higher 1% lows. For example, here we're getting plus 18% to the 1% lows. So not only are we consuming less power, dumping less heat into our room, but we're actually gaining a smoother gameplay experience by capping the FPS. Because 1% low is the indicator of how smooth your frame time is. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to see this on every game, or like for example, in this particular scenario right here, it's pretty much, it ends up evening out at the end. It's not much of a gain, but you will see with the 5900X, that'll be the next one that we look at, we're going to gain even more. So you can actually see this if you look at the frame time graph. It's smoother on the side where we've capped the FPS to 120. Now this area here, we're getting plus 12% to the 1% lows. So yeah, it's actually kind of, that is how I play. I usually cap my FPS because it's a smoother experience. Like I said, and actually I do want to make a video kind of expanding on this. I've wanted to make a video expanding on this. I was probably going to title it How I Play My Games or something like that, because I began to record some footage previously and I never got around to making it, but I do want to kind of dive into this a little bit more, test out a few different games, but you will always, at the very least, break even. But most of the time you will see a smoother gameplay experience if you cap your FPS, because when you're on CPU bound, your frame time will not be as smooth as when you are GPU bound, for example, usually, unless the game is like messed up and very unoptimized. But like if you look here, our 1% low gains here are higher than they were on the 7800X 3D running these same tests. So that is very interesting. It kind of makes sense because 7800X 3D is a faster CPU anyway, so that does make sense. But by capping the FPS, it's not like we're losing on a ton of frames anyway. But like I said, there's people that only look at 1% lows. They don't care what your frame rate is. They don't care what the averages are. All they care about is what are your 1% lows. It's a very important metric that measures the smoothness of your frame times, which is a very important metric. But yeah, I will probably make a video expanding on this sometime in the future. The next game on the list will be Alan Wake 2, and we're going to look at 3 scenarios: 1440p rasterization native, then 1440p rasterization with DLSS set to quality, and 1440p with path tracing maxed out native, and see if there's any differences.
There's the car, so where's the deputy?
Like usual, we're going to go through the settings here, beginning with 1440p native rasterization only. And I mean, before we go any further with this, because we're going to look at these 3 modes, there really isn't much of a difference. Actually, interestingly enough, with path tracing, there is a little bit more of a difference, even though clearly that would be GPU bound, obviously, you know, 1440p with path tracing. Even though we're able to get around 60 FPS natively, it still seems to be a little bit ahead for the 7800X 3D. So what I've done, I've made this run from here to the part where they both drop off that little dock. So it's just kind of like a short run. I've pretty much cut a little bit of the footage out just to make this a little bit shorter, because I did not think the Avatar part would take so long, but I did want to talk about those capping the frame rate, and at least bring it up before I make a video about it. But as you guys can see here, you can see a little bit of an advantage for the 7800X 3D on the 1% lows, but I mean, it's more or less within margin of error. It's not really that big of a difference. So I would say this is more or less a tie, which isn't really a surprise for, you know, a game that's extremely GPU demanding, even at 1440p, or even with DLSS set to quality for that matter, which is what we're checking at now. And we're going to go through the settings here. We've set DLSS to quality, and then all the rasterization settings are pretty much maxed out, and path tracing will be next. And same thing here, we're going to kind of cut some of that footage out because I don't want it to take forever. There isn't a huge difference. Again, a little bit of an advantage for the 7800X 3D, but nothing crazy.
Hey there. Agent Casey, right? Sheriff Breaker said you'd be coming by to take over the case.
You're half right.
Before we get to the crime scene, there's time to review the facts of the case so far. Make sure I'm seeing the clues clearly. Stairs are out. You okay to jump down?
I'm not that old.
So yeah, we're a few FPS ahead on the 7800X 3D. Nothing crazy. Right now we're gonna go through the settings for our path tracing. And we've gone back to 1440p native. And then we've essentially maxed out the path tracing part of the settings as high as it goes. And yeah, we're able to get close to a 60 FPS experience. 55-ish, 50 to 55-ish
I
FPS,
think I hear someone.
which with VRR feels like a 60 to me. Anyway, we got pretty high 1% lows relative, you know, to other games. I'd say this is pretty good. And again, so here we can actually see a little bit of an advantage for the 7800X 3D, which, like I mentioned previously, it is a little bit, at least it's not something I would have thought that would be the case, because, you know, path tracing is even more demanding than just 1440p native rasterization only, right? But because path tracing, ray tracing in general adds more of a load to the CPU, I guess it's not really all that surprising. But again, the difference between the two is not anything crazy, right? It's a few FPS.
Stairs are out. You okay to jump down?
I'm not that old.
With 19 corners and 334 feet of elevation changes in just over 4 miles, Spa-Francorchamps provides nearly every possible high-speed thrill.
Okay, so the next game we're going to look at is Forza Motorsport, and we're going to look at 1440p maxed out with ray tracing maxed out and with ray tracing completely disabled. And we're going to look at a little bit of a gameplay, but also the built-in benchmark as well, because this game is insanely CPU demanding for some reason, especially with the built-in benchmark. There's a lot going on, but we're going to take a look at ray tracing maxed out first, and then we're going to look at ray tracing disabled. What I did here, guys, is I did one lap, and at the end of that lap I took the 1% lows and averages gains of the 7800X 3D over the 5900X at the end of the lap, and I've sort of edited this out so it doesn't take forever, so we're going to kind of cut through the footage. Anyway, enjoy. Some pretty nice gains here with the 7800X 3D. Like I said, this game is very CPU demanding, and this is with ray tracing on. So we're going to take a look at the built-in benchmark next. This here's the built-in benchmark, guys, with full ray tracing, and our 1% lows and averages pretty much correspond with our lap around. As a matter of fact, here they're a tiny bit higher actually on the favor of the 7800X 3D. So yeah, I'm willing to bet even at 4K you would see a noticeable difference between these two CPUs in this game. Anyway though, I'll show the results here and you guys can pause it if you want to look at it. Alright, so now it's going to be pretty much the same exact thing, 1440p maxed out settings, but all ray tracing disabled. And we're going to do our lap, and then we're going to jump on our built-in benchmark and see how that compares. Okay, so we're gonna skip around this lap again, guys, because this video is getting kind of out of control. But here, we're actually gaining even more to 1% lows than we did with ray tracing on. With ray tracing enabled, we were at 22%, so here we're at 30%, 1% lows. On the averages here, we're actually a little bit less. I believe we were at 35, 36. Here we're at 30% plus for the 7800X 3D as an advantage, okay? So we're just going to skip around this lap here that I did, and then we'll check out the built-in benchmark, and then move on to the next game. Another racing game, actually. Very recent. Okay guys, so here we see some crazy gains for the 7800X 3D, but I would like to remind you that this is a rather short benchmark, so take it as you will, because you could probably run this again and you might get slightly different numbers, but I mean, clearly it's a good indicator of how CPU demanding this game is and how much faster the 7800X 3D actually is. Next game is EA Sports WRC Rally game. And here I'm cycling through the preset. What we're going to use here is the Ultra Graphical preset, but we're setting shadows and car reflections to ultra low, because car reflections in particular is extremely CPU demanding. I actually made a video about this that actually kind of blew up when the game first came out. It's very bad. Now, to address the obvious is when I captured the 5900X footage, it got stretched out. It's still the same exact settings, it just looks kind of weird, but it's still 2560 by 1440, same exact graphical settings. And again, we're skipping throughout the track. I essentially did half of the track and we're kind of skipping through it so this video doesn't become insanely long. And we didn't get a ton of 1% low gains, but we got insane amounts of averages. And I believe the reason is because this game has kind of stuttering issues anyway. So, and this was after a new driver install on both. I did one lap just to kind of warm up the shaders. But yeah, that's why 1% lows is not a huge difference. However, the averages is a massive difference. As a matter of fact, it's the biggest average differences that we've seen so far. And we have one more game to go, and then this video will be done. So, yeah. And the final game is Lords of the Fallen 2023. And we'll start with our settings. So 1440p, ultra preset, 100% resolution scale. And yeah, I'm not even going to bother putting any sort of advantage here, because at the end, the 7800X 3D has around less than 5% of 1% lows advantage. Just a tiny bit, so that's kind of within margin of error in my book. So I'm going to consider this a tie, which is not really all that surprising because this game isn't really all that CPU demanding anyway. It's mostly GPU demanding, and we can see that here even at 1440p native. Maybe if we tried DLSS we could see a difference, but I didn't. I'm kind of glad I didn't, because this video is almost 20 minutes long and I don't think I've ever made a 20-minute long video. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. It took a long time to put this one together. I wanted to put as much detail as I possibly could and label things for you guys, so just so that we can kind of discuss things together and see what the differences are. I've been thinking maybe doing a 1080p one as well. That will highlight the differences between these two CPUs even more. If you guys want to see that, let me know. Otherwise, I'm probably just going to move on to looking at a few other things. But anyway, I do hope that you enjoyed this. If you did enjoy it, give it a like. It would help me out. And if you want to see more content like this, you can consider subscribing. Or feel free to suggest me if you want me to look at any game or anything like that. I'd be happy to do it if I can. Anyway, guys, I hope you like this. And if I don't see you till after the holidays, happy holidays. Merry Christmas if you celebrate. And I hope you're doing well with yourselves and your family. Thanks for watching. Have a good one. Bye-bye.